On Sunday last, happening to be alone at dinner with the Empress, Her Majesty told me after dinner that an act of the Congress which had just been signed assured her the possession of Parma, that for the time being the government of this duchy would be left to Austria, who would pay her 100,000 francs a month, that she had been unable to obtain the reversion of these duchies for her son, that the son of the Queen of Etruria would be her heir, but that she would obtain the fiefs of the Archduke Ferdinand of Tuscany and Bohemia for her son, the total revenue of which amounted to about 600,000 francs, and that she had made an irrevocable resolution, namely, that she would never join the emperor again. Pressed for the reason of so strange a resolution, after advancing several reasons which I understood to destroy, she confessed that not having shared his disgrace, she cannot share prosperity, which she had done nothing to bring about. She added that she had written nothing on this subject, that she reserved it to herself to settle this matter with the emperor as soon as she was able to write him, that she is well aware that she will not be able to establish her son in Parma, that terrible as his sacrifice is, she will submit to it, and that she has consulted only two persons, the Archduke Charles and a lawyer, who consider that nothing can stand in the way of this arrangement. You will recognize the influence of the Empress's uncles in this matter. However this may be, that is her dream today. I beg you to make such use of this information as your prudence may suggest to you. I'm afraid of the effect that it will produce on the emperor. On Easter Sunday, the annexed note from King Joseph was brought me at 6 o'clock in the morning by a Swiss. This note informed me of the unhoped-for success of the emperor's march through France and of his very speedy arrival in Paris, of his wish to reestablish pacific relations with Austria and the other powers, and of his hope that his wife and child would be restored to him. I was charged to communicate this information in a confidential manner to the Empress. I was able to carry out this mission the same day without showing the princess the note, naming anybody, nor compromising the emperor's name, because she had told me that she had sworn to her father that she would hand over to him everything that came to her from the emperor. She therefore mentioned my name to her father as having been charged to beg her to give this assurance. The Emperor of Austria sent me his thanks through her. So she told me, no doubt to encourage me to name my correspondence and to tell her all I might learn in the future. This partial neutrality on the part of the Empress prevents me from unbosoming myself to her. I spoke to her today of Mr. de Vincent in a roundabout manner. She assured me that she had not seen him and had received nothing from him. She added that she had heard that he had not seen the emperor, but that he had seen you as well as Monsieur de Flahaut, that you wanted to give him some letters which he refused to take, that nevertheless she thinks that she remembers that her father spoke to her of a letter written to her which was brought by Monsieur de Vincent's secretary who left Paris on the day after the ambassador's departure, but that her father would not give it to her as he did not wish her to communicate with the emperor any more then he himself wished to communicate with him, whilst awaiting for all this tangle to unravel itself and for the Empress to return to a better way of thinking. I speak to her of the happiness which the Emperor's return to France has brought to his country, of the impatience with which she is expected there, of the Emperor's desire to see her again, etc., etc. But I do it quietly, because it is a topic which embarrasses her. All must be looked for from time and from the emperor's moderation. However great my circumspection, I am the victim of the lowest kind of espionage. A swarm of ignoble spies crawl around me and study my gestures, my steps, and my face. I fear I may be kept here a long time. I want to breathe another air. I want to see you all again. My health is breaking up. It is only the Empress and her son who enjoy splendid health. The Empress has grown much stouter. The Prince Imperial is an angel of beauty, strength, and sweetness. Madame de Montesquieu weeps for him every day. This poor lady is treated with great severity. She is shut up in a small apartment of 2 rooms in a private house in Vienna. Her son, who had obtained his passports for France, was arrested at Lambach 6 days ago. He was brought back to Vienna and was kept in solitary confinement for 4 days. He was only restored to his mother, whose sole comfort he is yesterday. He has given his word of honor not to leave Vienna without permission. It is to Monsieur de Talleyrand's frequent applications on his behalf that he owes this alleviation of his captivity. The particulars of the circumstances and causes which separated the young prince from his mother would take too long a time in describing, and besides, I know that she is going to write to you. Prince Eugène left this morning at 3 o'clock in the suite of the King of Bavaria. He had come to Vienna to take the necessary steps for obtaining the establishment, which is promised to him by the Treaty of April 11th. He was received with suspicion and mistrust at last. For the last 3 months, he appeared to have won the Emperor Alexander's affection and used to walk out with him every day for 2 hours. Since the letters which were sent to him from Paris on March 22nd last were seized, the Emperor Alexander has stopped seeing him, so that the Congress might not separate without having done something for him. The Principality of Pontecorvo was proposed to him some days ago. A condition imposed was that he should not reside there until fresh circumstances had arisen, but should go and live it by right with his family. On his refusal, the Congress admitted that an establishment was due to him and that until it could be given to him, he should be placed in the enjoyment of his estates and revenues in Italy. But till today, April 7th, no orders have been given. Last night at 12:30, Prince Eugène had not received his passports. Since April 3rd, they have been deliberating as to whether they ought to be given to him. They wanted him to give his word of honor that he would not leave Bavaria, but he refused to do so. As he is not a prisoner of war, he intends to stay 1 or 2 weeks in Munich to take the princess and his children and to accompany them too, by right. During the last 6 months, I have written several letters to General Bertrand and have sent him 2 pamphlets. I do not know whether he has received them. P.S. This is the 8th of April. I wrote to you yesterday in great haste and without any order. I have 1,000 other things to tell you, which it would take ages to write. What I venture to commend to your prudence is what relates to the Empress's person. This princess is good at heart, but for the time being, she is under foreign influences. In the preceding letter, I have spoken to Prince Eugène, but I neither said how nor why Napoleon's stepson found himself in Vienna. We related that after the fall of the empire, the viceroy of Italy had been forced to take refuge in Munich, and that then he had been sent for to Paris by his mother, the Empress Josephine. Prince Eugène was well received there by the Bourbons and the allied sovereigns, and particularly by the Emperor of Russia, who pressed him to come to Vienna during the Congress. Alexander appointed a meeting with him in the Austrian capital, promising him to support his claims for the establishment, which had been stipulated for him by Article 8 of the Treaty of Frankfurt. In Vienna, the preponderating influence exercised by the Emperor Alexander had won the favor of the Austrian government and of the other sovereigns assembled in Congress. For Prince Eugène, he was treated like a royal prince and invited to all the fetes. Napoleon's return from the island of Elba, to which the Emperor of Russia suspected Prince Eugène of having contributed, put an end to the friendly relations which had existed between them till then. The Emperor Alexander bore a grudge against Prince Eugène as long as he remained in Vienna. It was only at the time of his visit to Munich, whither the prince had retired, that the Tsar restored him to his friendship. So lavishly had the territories been distributed that there remained nothing available to be given to Prince Eugène. In execution of the Treaty of Fontainebleau, which assured him an establishment outside France, a decision taken under the Emperor Alexander's influence converted the stipulation of the Treaty of April 11th concerning the Empress Josephine's son into an indemnity, the amount of which was to be taken out of the kingdom of Naples, and which should be the equivalent of a principality of 50,000 inhabitants. Prince Eugène estimated the total value at 12 million francs, but the Neapolitan government reduced this indemnity to 5 million. The estates which the prince derived from the kingdom of Italy and the endowments which the emperor had bestowed upon him in Rome and Lombardy were left in his possession. 2,700,000 francs which he had left on his departure in the Italian treasury were restored to him. And finally, the King of Bavaria, his father-in-law, vested him with the Principality of Eichstatt, taken from the Bavarian states. Prince Eugene was at the same time created premier peer of the Kingdom of Bavaria, taking precedence after the princes of the royal family and Duke of Lichtenberg. A regiment of Bavarian chasseurs was further given to him. Count Las Casas, on his return from St. Helena, had a communication to make to Prince Eugene, which the latter received after having been authorized to do so by his father-in-law, the King of Bavaria. In 1814, the emperor had deposited with Count Lavalette a sum of 1,600,000 francs, which he hid under the flooring of one of the rooms in the chateau of La Verrière, an estate in the neighborhood of Rambouillet, which belonged to him. The chateau was occupied by the Allied troops, who fortunately did not discover the treasure. After their departure, Count de Lavalette, alarmed for the safety of the trust confided to his keeping, begged Prince Eugene to take upon himself to keep 1/2 of the amount. The prince made varying payments and held at Napoleon's disposal during the last 2 or 3 years of the emperor's life 20,000 francs a month, which he took from the fund in his keeping. When this fund was on the point of being exhausted, Eugene asked the members of the imperial family to contribute their share of expenses, the object of which might be considered sacred. Napoleon's death happening in the meantime put an end to the negotiations which had been entered upon for this purpose. Prince Eugene died in February 1824, less than a year after the marriage of his eldest daughter to Prince Oscar, son of the King of Sweden, Bernadotte. Thus, unless anything happens to prevent it, the throne of Sweden, which Napoleon wanted to give to Prince Eugene in 1810, will descend to his daughter. The two main points in my letter to the Duc de Vincennes, Caulaincourt, were the obligation enforced upon the Empress Marie-Louise to consent to her son's forfeiture of the right of succession to the states of Parma, and her determination never to reunite herself to the emperor. On considering what had been going on around me during the preceding 6 months, I had understood that some unfortunate denouement of the critical situation in which so many events had placed the empress must be expected. This princess, deprived of all protection, surrounded by pitfalls, led astray by perfidious advice, had become the too docile instrument of unscrupulous politicians. In spite of my provisions, which had never been very optimistic, I was painfully affected to see that Marie-Louise abandoned the only line of conduct which any care for her own glory ought to have kept steadfastly before her. Amongst the reasons which decided the empress to leave her son in Vienna and to go and establish herself in Parma without him, she gave the following, to which no allusion is made in my letter: that she was forced to make this sacrifice, painful as it was, because it was in her son's interest. She added that if she did not obtain the sovereignty of some state of some importance, she would be able to do nothing for him, whereas once established in Parma, it would be possible for her to save 500,000 francs a year, which, added to the revenues of the fiefs in Bohemia, would assure an independent position for her son after her death. I permitted myself to answer the empress that pecuniary considerations had very little weight in the position in which her son found himself placed, that if his name and quality as Napoleon's son did not make him great enough and recommended him sufficiently to the sympathy of the world, 1,000,000 francs a year would not compensate him for the loss of the rank from which he had been cast down, that she could not resign herself thus to the disinheriting of her son, who, already deprived of his paternal inheritance, was also being stripped of his maternal inheritance by an unjust decision on the part of the Congress, and who, in consequence, would live outside the pale of the law, without fatherland, without a title, and, so to say, without a name. For nobody would know how to call him. With regard to the idea which she had expressed of separating herself from the emperor, I did not fail to remind Marie-Louise of the affection of which Napoleon had so often given her proof, and of the grief which he had felt at the obstacles which were placed in the way of their meeting. Obstacles, the responsibility of which he was very far from attributing to her. I spoke finally of the pain which her husband would feel at a separation, the whole blame of which would fall upon her. I told her that she would be received in France like an angel of peace, and that the boon of her return would win her the eternal gratitude of the French nation, that I hoped that she would change her mind and give up the violent resolution in forming which she could have consulted neither her heart nor her interest. I assured her that if she would make a statement in exactly the contrary sense, expressing herself forcibly, this manifestation of her will would have very great weight. All that I could say on this matter made very little impression on Marie-Louise. She repeated that she had not been able to consult her own feelings, nor to rely on her own judgment in a question where such grave interests were involved, that the advice of her Uncle Charles and a lawyer had dispelled her uncertainty, that moreover she had signed nothing and would sign nothing before she had come to an understanding with the Emperor Napoleon, that she had fully made up her mind not to consent to any divorce from him, but that she personally would come to a friendly agreement for their separation with him as soon as she had liberty to write to him. I gave my letters to Monsieur de Montchamp, begging him not to deliver them to anybody but the Duc de Vicence. He promised me to do so and faithfully carried out his mission. I learned later on my return to France that this minister had immediately taken the letters to the emperor. Napoleon, in his anxiety to receive news from Vienna, wanted to read the original copy, and therefore the precaution which I had wanted to take when I asked the minister to make prudent use of my communication was of no avail. I asked Monsieur de Montchamp before his departure if he had been charged with any message from Monsieur de Talleyrand. Monsieur de Montchamp gave me to understand that this minister could, for the time being, be of no service whatever to the emperor's cause. As a matter of fact, the hostilities of the Allies against Napoleon and the array of force which they were marshalling against him were so great that any wish to serve the Napoleonic cause would have been considered a crime in the eyes of the Allied powers. It certainly could not be Monsieur de Talleyrand who would defy the resentment which an attitude so little in conformity with his character and so audacious would have excited against him in the coalition.